Planting in dry shade is one of the most taxing conditions in a garden. We get so many questions on Gardener's Question Time on it. Most of us have dry shade. So I'm just going to plant these serpentine borders. As you can see, I've done a fair amount already, but I was going to just run through my thought processes in how I go about designing it and how I go about planting it. Now, first of all, I've done a number one thing wrong straight away. If I'm planting in dry shade, I would normally aim to plant in September, even, well, maybe August, if it was a wet August, September or October. And the reason for that is because when it's warm at the back end of the year, the plants can get their roots down and get growing before we have those very dry snaps, which we often get in spring. Now, I haven't done that because we've been busy laying the path. We didn't have time, so I'm doing it now. So I'm going to just bear in mind that I must be extra vigilant if it's dry and give them more water. So first of all, having said that, I decide what I want to plant. They always say right plant, right place, and it certainly is true for dry shade. Up to now, it's been very simple. We just had a straight grass path, if you remember, and we had a lot of this euonymus here. I think it's Fortunii Emerald Gaiety, or Silver Queen, and that is a sort of number one easy plant. It's a bit brash, and instead of having the whole strip of it, I've taken some out to break it up. And if other plants that are really easy in dry shade is something like Symphytum Hidcote Blue or Hidcote Pink, and that's a low growing comfrey. It's a bit invasive, but I've got masses of it in orchard areas that I just want no maintenance, and I know something's just going to grow in the dry shade. So what have I chosen to plant here? So first of all, I've chosen to plant this little hedge here of the Sarcococca, Sarcococca humilis hookeriana, and I've planted them at about 5 per metre run. So I worked it out and spaced it out roughly using my feet and a trowel, and I think that gives winter definition and summer definition, and it highlights the pattern of the path. It will be fantastically scented come the springtime next year, and it's not too formal looking, so I do want it to look quite naturalistic. There are other structural plants here already. We've got the lovely box balls, which are growing in my baseless pots, which haven't been watered for about 20 years after the first couple of months that they went in. I've got the lovely sort of fluted stems of the hornbeam, which I love. So there is that structure, and so I'm just pepping it up. But before I start to select my plants, even before that, I think, do I want a naturalistic style of planting that's mainly in drifts, or planting singly in scattered around, a sort of splattergun approach, with the odd highly accentuated plant, that's something that's a bit bigger? Or do I want to use a sort of more traditional style where you have a group of this, a group of that, another group of this, and so on, and it's all planted in distinct groups? And I wanted to go slightly more naturalistic here because this part of the garden is more formal, so I think it's nice to have the contrast down the two side paths and just keep it a little bit more free flowing. So having said that, I then decided on my plants. So I have gone here, as I said, for the Sarcococca. There's a lot of Hellebore hybridus, Hellebore cross hybridus, which just seed around, which I will keep, and I love it. And then I've gone for some height. So I've gone for Persicaria Fats Domino. Actually, it's Fat Domino. I always think of Fats Domino because of the lovely hunky musician, but it is Fat Domino. And that Persicaria is a bistort, and it's got a nice chunky, rich, deep red flower. And that's higher, that goes up to about 90 centimetres. So I'm going to spatter that through. And so in the summertime, we'll have a good long blob of those quite informal flowers. But underneath that, I've got a matrix really of lower plantering. Heuchera Lime Marmalade. I'm not a big fan of Heuchera, but Lime Marmalade has got these nice lime coloured leaves, and that will just pep up the light. It will lighten it when these come fully into leaf and it's quite shady. I've also got a fern, a Polysticum setiferum, and I like this soft shield fern because it does really well in dry shade here, and I will just I put it mixed up with the Heuchera in sort of drifts all around the back. Now what I haven't done, and I've also put some hydrangeas, so my big star players are Hydrangea Whims Red. Now that, people say hydrangeas love moisture because of the name Hydra, but actually the name Hydra comes from the shape of the seed vessel, and I've grown them here for 30 years and we are so dry and they do really well. Now Whims Red is relatively new and it comes out sort of white, it goes to pale green, and then it goes to a lovely rich purpley red colour. So I think that will look really good, and it will flower towards the back end of the summer, and it will stay in flower for a good 3 months, changing colour. So it's going to add a lot of interest here, and I bought slightly bigger specimens for those. I've really splashed out. When you actually come to planting, a lot of plants will actually arrive in containers if you're buying them. I always try to buy them bare root if I can, but if you're planting at the wrong time of year, or you often can't get bare root, so therefore you have to get containerized, bare root plants will establish faster and they'll grow. They are much, much less expensive. Now when you buy a plant, let's just tick this out, they normally become highly root bound. Now this isn't, but often you'll get quite a solid wall of roots around the edge. And what you have to do, I'm just going to show you this but not actually do it because this doesn't really need it. I will just tease these out at the bottom. But if this was a wall of roots, I would either do 4 vertical slips with a knife, 1 down each side, and pop it in. And that might seem very mean, but it's not. What happens is you're just cutting the root caps off, and then your plant will develop new root hairs within days. And the root hairs are the bit that actually pulls up the water. They're tiny, tiny little hairs that grow off the root. And that cutting will stimulate that, and then that will really help it establish well. And root hairs don't live for ages. They grow, they die, they develop new ones. So they're quite a sort of moving on thing. Now another way you can do it easier is just slice off the bottom. And again, seems mean, but it will just trigger masses of root growth. And another way, which they say is the best, but it's a bit more faff, is you cut 4 sides off each one. 1, 2, 3. Back my hand is, and again that seems that's called cubing it. You cube the root, and that is meant to be the best, but it takes long, and when you're planting lots of plants you don't do that. Another thing when I'm planting lots of plants is I wear the right gear. Now I haven't put on half a stone since the last video. I've just got my gardening trousers on, and I love these because they got built-in knee pads. They got loads of pockets. I've got my phone in one, my secateurs in another, bits of paper in others. They're waterproof. I tend to wear them nearly every day I'm gardening, winter or summer now. I've got both types because they are just so comfy and they're just lovely to work in. I've got them over my jeans. I always seem to have them over jeans or leggings because when I have to dive into the office or the house, I can just strip off outside the door and not scare the neighbours. So getting down to the planting now. So what I would do, I'm not going to plant this one, I'm just going to put it back in its pot because I've actually planted the hedge here. What I do is I actually soak the pot in water, and you see bubbles come up even though I did actually water them last night. And that the compost does dry out very quickly, and you want a really nicely soaked root ball. Okay, so I'll soak it in water till all the bubbles have stopped, take it out, and then I will dig a hole. And then I'm not actually going to put it here, but I'll just dig a hole with a spade or trowel, whatever I was using. And then, if it looks like it's going to be dry, I will actually water the base of the hole. So I know the soil is dry, is wet, I mean down below. I'll just water it. And then I'll just pop the plant in, firm it around. Let's just do it here, even though it's in totally the wrong position. I'll just firm it in. I won't dig a hole any bigger than necessary. I won't put any fertiliser or compost in there because I want its roots to spread into the surrounding soil. That's all been disproved now. And then I'll firm it in nicely. And then I will water it again. And then I won't come back and water it, even if it's quite hot, for a good week or 2. I'll watch them just to make sure they're okay. But the thing is, if you water infrequently, with lots, so once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks, maybe with a quarter of one of those cans per plant, the roots will follow the water down. They will just develop, their roots can detect water in some way, and they will follow the roots, follow the water down, and then you've got a nice deep rooting system. If I just sprinkled a bit on the top, it wouldn't penetrate and the roots would tend to come up to the top. Now I'm actually going to pull this out there because I'm not going to put you there. He's destined to go on the other side of the serpentine. But what I have done is, once I've organised what plants I'm going to have here, it still looks quite bare. Okay, a lot of them haven't even come out of the ground yet, so you can't see them. So I tend to put in fillers, and these are ones that I will just get from around the garden. So primroses I've got here, which I've just dug up from the kitchen garden where they're seeding around, and I was just going to dig in little ones of these all the way around. I'll water them well. When I pick up the clump, I can divide some of them. They divide very nicely, and so I can divide, well, this clump won't, but the bigger clumps will divide, and so I can make the clumps go further. Another filler that I will use is Honesty. I've got lots of lunaria around there, so I'll pop those in. Then I've got little Viola labradorica. They're seed all around here. So those, I'll put the viola probably mixed with the primrose, so we've got a nice edging all the way along. And I think if you do that, obviously the primroses, the violas, the lunaria will self-seed, so you'll manage them. And I might start pulling them out later on. And that's with this scheme. It is quite muted. I haven't used lots of plants, but this is going to be a fairly low maintenance border. And if I put in 50 different types of plants, everywhere a different type of plant butts up with another different type of plant, is where the high maintenance levels occur. So I'm keeping it fairly simple. I'm using just plants that I know will really do really well, but I'm also going to throw in some more which I haven't got yet, which are Lilium Martagon Orange Marmalade. Now this is going to be the marmalade borders with the Heuchera Lime Marmalade and the Martagon Lily Orange Marmalade, but these will be lovely and tall. They grow about this high, and I've had some Martagon lilies in the border underneath that tree in deep shade, dry deep shade, for maybe 25 years, and they still are doing really well. And I just thought that bit of orange in July would really add another touch. And I will then probably add tulips to come up, one type of tulips all the way down next spring. I might add camasias, I might add some white foxgloves. I will pep it up as I see fit, but at the moment I'm just putting in the basic matrix, adding the primroses, and then I'll enjoy developing it. I've also got some lovely geranium white doves, which I took loads of cuttings of, a new plant that I got at the end of last summer, and that's growing on well in the greenhouse, so I'll plant that out later on. Now when I've finished planting, everything will be watered in, and then I'll add a mulch over the top. Now that will help keep that moisture in, and I will probably put a layer of about 50 mil, something like that, an inch or two over the top. And I haven't fed the soil in the sense of I haven't put a fertiliser on, but I will put that mulch on now, and I'll carry on putting that mulch on. And a mulch doesn't give an instant hit of fertiliser by any means. In fact, when you put a mulch on, it goes on giving out food for about 5 years as it breaks down. Even if you used finished, what you think is finished compost, it isn't finished, and it goes on developing. So it's like a slow release, and it's a nice slow feed, and that's what I want. I don't want to hit it with masses of artificial fertilizer, which will cause an unnatural boost. I just want to slowly feed them with my mulch. And that will give it a very low NPK, something like 111 or 0.1, very low. But it will also, of course, keep the moisture into the plant. I want those plants to get off to a really good start in these what are quite taxing conditions, and hopefully they'll be hopefully they'll all get established and very quickly you won't see any bare soil at all, so we'll have very few weeds. So hopefully I'll be able to show you this in a few weeks' time, and it will be looking really quite full.